All right, everyone. Good afternoon. We're going to reconvene our public hearing for the Government Oversight Committee on February 18th. The bills that are under review for this public hearing are the following: HB 6931, an act concerning conflicts of interest due to an employer other than the state under the State Code of Ethics. HB 6073, an act concerning the process and timeline for the review of existing regulations of Connecticut state agencies. And SB 1296, an act concerning statements of financial interest under the State Code of Ethics for public officials. So let me start by asking if there's any opening comments by my good co-chair and my ranking members.
Just wanted to say, I hope everyone had a nice long holiday weekend, got to spend some time with friends and family, and welcome to the public hearing today. It's going to be a busy, busy week here. Thanks.
Thank you. And turn over my good colleague, Representative Carney.
Sure. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just looking forward to the public hearing and seeing what some folks have to say. So thanks.
Okay, and our ranking member in the Senate, Senator Sampson, was here. He stepped out because of the recess, but when he's back, if he has comments, we'll give him that opportunity as well. But let's get started with our first speaker, is the Executive Director of the Office of State Ethics, Peter Lewandowski. I think you're here.
Yes, thank you, Senator Gatka-Wilcox, Representative Dayton, Senator Sampson, Representative Carney, and distinguished committee members. My name is Peter Lewandowski, Executive Director of the Office of State Ethics. Thank you for this opportunity to provide testimony in support of two raised bills that contain legislative proposals presented by the Office of State Ethics. I've submitted written testimony on these two bills, and I'll highlight here a few points. First, I'd like to say a few words in support of House Bill 6931, an act concerning conflicts of interests due to an employer other than the state under the State Codes of Ethics. This bill makes necessary revisions to the Code of Ethics for public officials by extending the conflicts of interests provisions to public officials and state employees' non-state employer and the non-state employer of such officials or employee's spouse. This change will impact General Statute Section 1-85, which deals with substantive conflicts, and Section 1-86, which addresses potential conflicts. The statutory provisions which address substantial and potential conflicts are essential provisions under the State Code of Ethics. In fact, they are most fundamental in any governmental ethics code and are also common in the private sector codes of conduct. Most conflicts of interest provisions in governmental ethics codes address conflicts involving outside or private employment of public officials. Under our state code, however, a public official or state employee currently may take official action that provides a direct financial benefit to his or her private employer. The proposed bill will address this present loophole, particularly involving full-time state public officials and employees. It is important to note that under this bill, a public official or state employee does not have a conflict and may take official action if any benefit or detriment accrues to no greater extent than to any other member of the profession, occupation, group, or industry that's related to the outside employer. Further, in recognition of the fact that Connecticut has a part-time legislature, and most legislators, out of economic necessity, must engage in private non-state employment, this bill notes that an elected official has a substantial or direct conflict involving their outside employer or employer of the official's spouse only if such official has actual knowledge that the benefit will occur and that benefit is distinct from any other member of profession, large group, or industry. Still, even if an elected official is faced with a substantial conflict, that official may either abstain from official action or prepare a written statement describing the matter requiring action, the nature of the conflict, and why the elected official is able to act despite that conflict in public interest. The purpose of this requirement is to provide greater transparency in the process. I should note that this will rarely affect members of the General Assembly and only in a situation where a member is dealing with a bill that is exclusive to their employer and not to an industry or a large group of employers. As you well know, it is quite rare to see a bill that does not apply to an entire industry, group, or profession. Finally, the restriction on taking official action with respect to public officials' private employer or the employer of the official's spouse would also extend to potential conflicts under Section 1-86 of the General Statutes, which, by the way, does not apply to elected officials. This bill offers a long-standing opportunity to clarify an oversight and shortcoming of current conflicts of interest provisions under our state code of ethics. Previously, this bill passed in the Senate on 3 occasions, and after consultation with a number of stakeholders at the last legislative session, it has been further improved, and we hope and we encourage members of the Government Oversight Committee to support it. In addition, I would like to say a few words in support of Senate Bill 1296, an act concerning statements of financial interests under the Code of Ethics for Public Officials. This bill makes necessary updates concerning filing requirements and disclosures to the statement of financial interests. First, it amends subsection A of Section 1-83 of the General Statutes to include members of the executive department, boards, commissions, councils, other than members of advisory boards, who exercise authority to enter into or approve large state construction or procurement contracts as that term is defined in subdivision 3 of Section 1-101 MM of General Statutes. That section really applies to any contracts valued at $500,000 or more. Those members of the executive department boards would be required to file statements of financial interests. Although presently many executive boards, department boards, commissions, and councils file pursuant to Governor Lamont's designation, there are still some boards that do not file, and we would like to simplify the process and extended authority, especially with those boards that expend substantial state funds. The extension of the statutory filing requirement will bring consistency in SFI filings and increase public transparency. Finally, the second revision to this bill extends the exemption of reporting of securities under the SFI filings to retirement plans under Section 403 of the IRS Code, which deals with retirement plans for public schools and certain 501c3 tax-exempt organizations. Similar exemptions already apply to 457 plans and 401k plans. So this would be extended to 403s as well. Thank you for your consideration of our agency proposals. I look forward to working with the committee, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Lewandowski. Our a good colleague, ranking member is back now. So let me ask first if he had any comments that he wants to make before we jump into questions.
No, but I have a question.
Great. So we'll give you the first question then.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairman. And through you, Peter, good to see you. Thank you for being here today and testifying on these bills. I recognize them. I was just talking with the chairs earlier about how I've seen these bills in the Government Administration and Elections Committee in the past. And my recollection is that both of the items, 1 and 3 on this agenda, have been before that committee before, and I think they've passed out unanimously several times. Can you maybe just enlighten me on why you think maybe they haven't made it across the finish line? Because I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to get these things done. They seem very straightforward to me. Through you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sampson. That's correct. They've passed out of the, they got out of the GAE committee unanimously. They passed in the Senate on 3 occasions, as I noted earlier. I've worked with House leadership. There were some concerns about the impact of the proposal with respect to the conflicts of interests bill on legislators because of the volume of legislation that goes through both the House and Senate. The concern is that there would have to be some kind of knowledge that a legislator would have to have, elected official would have to have, in order to be to face a conflict. So that the knowledge, if you have a knowledge of a substantial conflict with respect to your outside employer, you would face that conflict, and you would have to either abstain, as is provided in the bill, or is file a statement on the floor of either the House or the Senate and describe the conflict and why, despite the conflict, you may still act in public interest. So we worked out a language. I think those were the concerns that been expressed over the past few years, and I believe that the language in this current bill before you addresses those concerns.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. No, I appreciate that very much, Peter. Thank you very much for the insight also. And I'll take a quick look at the bill to see if I can recognize the changes that have been made. I never thought it was too much of a leap before anyway. I mean, I kind of know, where I'm going to run into a potential conflict. And I would suspect that most lawmakers should know if their spouse would have a conflict as well. But I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sampson. Let me actually follow up on that point because that was my question. Was that language that only if such official has actual knowledge, the benefit would occur? Was that included as a compromise? Because in terms of accountability and transparency and just propriety, it would seem that having a reason to believe that there was going to be a benefit would in some ways be better for the public because, it avoids sort of appearances of impropriety, whereas having actual people may be able to shield themselves from showing that they had direct actual knowledge. But is that language that, just based on what you just said, is that language you're putting in to move the bill forward, but the previous language was in fact around reason to believe or expect?
Yes, the previous language did have the reason to believe or expect phrase, and we changed it to actual knowledge to move this bill forward. We believe that I don't think this new language weakens the bill for two reasons. One is substantial conflicts are very rare, as I've noted in my testimony before elected officials. You really there has to be a specific bill that distinguishes your outside employer from all other employers. Most legislative business impacts industry, impacts a large group of employers or a specific profession. So in that regard, those conflicts are easy to spot when you have them. The bills that presently would have a situation where, let's say, it affects your private employer, but it affects a group of employers. Ultimately, it's up to the legislator, to an elected official, to determine whether they still wish to take official action. The code of ethics in Connecticut is silent as to appearances. It's really left to the elected officials' discretion whether they wish to proceed and take official action, even in a situation where the bill impacts an entire industry, including their own private employer. And some folks presently do exercise that option of abstaining. And it's left to legislators' discretion, because even if we change that right now, ultimately, again, the code is silent as to appearances. It's really left to the judgment of the public official. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, thank you. But so I guess just taking that a step further, what would have to be established in order to even show that you had actual knowledge? I mean, the bar would be just that much higher. And given that there's such limited circumstances, I'm just curious, why was there such a problem around that language? Because it does seem, as you say, that most legislation is not even going to fall within this category. And so, in other words, would it be better for us to have a language of whether when someone has a reason to believe there's going to be benefit to their own employer, that ought to be sufficient? Is the bar then raised too high to prove actual knowledge?
Well, if you see a bill and let's say that goes through your committee, or let's say it's on the floor, and and that bill pertains, and it's obvious that it affects only a singular employer or a small group of employers, one would expect that the legislators are cognizant of what they're voting on. In other words, if there is this bill that is specific to a singular employer, whoever that is, and not just an industry bill, that legislator would know, and would have that knowledge, as to, the bills are posted, the bills are voted on, whether it's in the committee or on the floor of a respective chamber. So it's not, I think pleading ignorance would be a tough sell, I think, in that context.
Oh, well, unless I mean, could you plead ignorance in the sense that you weren't sitting on any of those committees, but you still are working for that employer? I mean, I'm just wondering if there's any kind of loophole around that. But you think most things will be addressed in terms of accountability, for even with the language of actual knowledge, because once a bill is impacting a particular employee, is what you're saying that it's going to be presumed that there's going to be benefit to that employee?
Yes, I mean, if so, it's understood that not every legislator sits on every committee. There will be, in the initial stages of legislative business, folks may not have that knowledge right away, but once bills go through the process and end up up for a vote, folks would. Elected officials would at least do minimal due diligence to at least know what the bill is on. Maybe they may not know the specificity of a given bill. And by the way, I should note there is an regulatory exemption for legislators under ethics regulations, agency regulations. Where, let's say, a conflicted matter that is incorporated into a large bill, such as an omnibus budget bill, or let's say a bonding package that happens to be, may present, let's say, a conflict. A legislator is not prohibited from voting on that overall budget package or bonding bill that has a conflicted line item, provided that they abstain from commenting on the floor of the House or Senate on that conflicted matter. They can, of course, comment on, generally speaking, on the budget, on other provisions of the budget or bonding package, but they would have to abstain from the conflicted line item that's in a larger bill. So really, this what we're talking about, having actual knowledge, it really focuses on specific bills that are particular to an individual employer or a small group of employers.
Thank you very much for that clarification. And good co-chair, Representative Teeth.
Thank you so much. That actually answers one of my questions, was because sometimes we have a budget implementer, which has a lot of different aspects to it, and folks might have an individual conflict, but it's clear there. In terms of reporting our ethics regulations and laws in other states, is there anything equivalent to what we're proposing here in any of our Northeast states?
In terms of conflicts, Well, so for example, we issuing a statement if one is faced with a conflict.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not to my knowledge. If our sister states in the Northeast have a specific requirement where an elected official, if they're faced with an substantial conflict, would have to issue, well, they have an option of either abstaining or issuing that statement.
Okay, can I ask like a how this might work in practice? Let's say I am a landlord of a various amount of housing developments or apartment complexes, and there becomes a bill on the floor of the house that has to do with a rent cap. As a person who owns a lot of these and rental properties, would I have to abstain from such a bill if this was an issue?
Well, if it's in this particular scenario, if it's a cap that applies to all uh, uh, real estate folks, then no, you would not be required to abstain. And ultimately, again, it's left to your discretion if the optics of it um, might be of concern. That's left to your judgment whether you wish to proceed. But again, legally speaking, you would not be precluded because, and again, it applies to an entire sector of folks.
And that's really what I was trying to understand is, when we talk about some of the sectors that we're dealing with, sometimes they're very, very broad. But I think I have a better understanding about how these work. So I think that'll be it for my questions today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there other questions? No, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and then our next speaker will be our Vice President of Public Policy for the CBIA, Christopher Davis.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairs, ranking members, other esteemed members of the Government Oversight Committee. My name is Christopher Davis. I am the Vice President of Public Policy for the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, CBIA. Great to be with you. First time testifying in person to this wonderful new committee, and I very much enjoy the opportunity to do so on this important bill. As you may know, CBIA is the largest business organization here in Connecticut with thousands of member businesses, about 90% of which are small businesses that are directly impacted by regulations here in the state. I'm thankful for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 6073, an act concerning the process and timeline of review for existing regulations of Connecticut state agencies. Particularly like to thank Representative Dathan for introducing this bill this year. By requiring state agencies to review and identify obsolete, inconsistent, ineffective regulations, this bill represents a significant opportunity to modernize Connecticut's regulatory environment. Last fall, the Connecticut Business and Industry Association launched our CBIA Foundation and had our Opportunity Connecticut Long-Term Economic Plan, in which we called for this very bill to take place. Doing the research through 30 different economic forums across the state, meeting with hundreds of stakeholders for a diverse group of unions, business leaders, community members, came up with this long-term economic plan for the state of Connecticut. And interestingly enough, in almost every other state that our researchers did work in, they've said that workforce was the biggest issue for the businesses in that state to be able to grow the economy. Here in Connecticut, they identified business climate as the biggest challenge for growth here in Connecticut. Which was very interesting in their findings, working in over 30 other states, that business climate, and in particular, the regulatory climate here in Connecticut, is such a challenge. So this bill here today represents a great opportunity for our state agencies to go through each and every one of their regulations on a regular basis and make those recommendations. And included in the report and in my written testimony that I submitted here today are some of the best practices that we have seen from other states, red states, blue states, purple states, all taking on this issue across the country and making these necessary recommendations, including some very significant cost reductions, time reductions, not just for businesses, but actually for the state agencies themselves, and the ability to find that efficiencies within state government and reduce costs for the taxpayer as well. So with that, I just want to make one recommendation. I know the original proposed bill called for the reports from these state agencies to be posted on the e-regs system. I noticed in the committee bill that was not included in the actual drafting of the bill. And so as these agencies make these reports, submit them to the committees of cognizance for public hearings, I would just recommend that those reports also get posted onto the committee's websites as a way for the public to be able to see what was actually reported out by each one of those agencies prior to the public hearings. And with that, I thank you all for the opportunity to testify in support.
Great, thank you very much. Me first open it up to my colleagues. Representative Dathan.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate you testifying on this bill. I've tried it for the last couple of years. I think it's important. I used to be chair of the Regs Review Committee. And when I got onto the committee and I saw the number of regulations that were there, it was almost mind blowing. And I thought, how can businesses, how can nonprofits, how can other agencies actually navigate themselves through this because it is so difficult. So I appreciate that you testified. I also think that yeah, I like your suggestion on making sure that we post the regulations to the committees of cognizance so that folks who aren't regularly in the e-reg system, which is a very difficult system, took me almost 2 years to get myself fully up to speed on how everything worked. I think it's good. And I also appreciated your sort of estimates on some of what's happening in other states. In terms of some outdated regulations that you've heard from your business community, what are some of the key things that are highlighted?
So right now, one of the biggest ones that we're facing is the Transfer Act and the change that's happening there. So we have release-based regulations that actually have been submitted by the Department of Environmental or Energy and Environmental Protection to try to convert those outdated, really outdated, decades-old Transfer Act regulations to release-based regulations. So we're looking forward to that process playing out. I believe they're up for regs review in the next few weeks. But that was a perfect example of outdated regulations that at the time people thought were going to be a best practice. In fact, Connecticut was the leader in that space of trying to transfer properties from one owner to the other when there's an environmental spill. But now here we are decades later, that is still in place. Almost every other state has surpassed us and had much better, cleaner, faster, more efficient regulations put into place. And here we are decades later, just finally getting around to changing those. And this has been a 5-year process. Granted, it started kind of right before COVID hit, but it's been a 5-year process to get to where we are today for those release-based regulations. So I hate to say there's poster childs out there, but that would be one great example of where, you know, there's regulations on the book. They're now decades old. They were perhaps the right approach back then, but now in this modern era, there's much better ways to move forward, and we can learn from other states to make those best practices, which is what we've actually done with these release-based regulations coming before us now.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Chris, good to see you. Thank you for being here today. I just want to say how great it is to have you in that role at CBIA with your legislative experience. I think it's a benefit to both the legislature when you come to bring CBIA's concerns to us, and it's a benefit to them to have you on board to understand exactly how things go in this building and so on. I don't really have a question. It's pretty straightforward. We want to cut regulation and red tape to improve the operation of state government, and at the end of the day, improve the workings of the business community as well. And I will also second the chairman's comment about your material about other states. I was fascinated by the names of these agencies in other states. They're all pretty dry except for Texas. So Texas has the Texas Sunset Commission. I thought that was great, and maybe we need a Connecticut Sunset Commission.
Yeah, from our research, it's actually a very popular commission there, and you see in some of these other states as well that you actually have an online portal in Arizona where individual members of the community can submit like, hey, we really think this regulation should be changed. And it can be a great opportunity for then that agency to get that feedback and be able to actually start tinkering with some of those regulations based off of the feedback directly from the public. So there's a lot of other best practices that can be adopted from other states, but this bill here is a great first start. One that, quite frankly, agencies, some are already doing, some may not be doing as much as they should be. So this is a great way to get them going. I know that the existing legislation already exists. It was a little bit complicated, went to regs review. There wasn't really a way to hold them accountable, but this bill gives the opportunity for those committees of cognizance to then be able to go and require the public hearings on the reports as well. So thank you very much for bringing this forward.
Yeah, fabulous. Through you, Madam Chairman, I'll just say that all of that sounds great, and that's really, I think, our universal hope for the Government Oversight Committee going forward, that we're going to open the door to new methods and new mechanisms to improving government and making sure it's more accountable and transparent to people. So thank you for your contribution, Chris. I always appreciate seeing you, and thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sampson. Representative Carney.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Chris, thank you for your testimony. And I, second everything Senator Sampson said regarding your legislative service. My one question is, and you alluded to this in your testimony, and there appears to be, a lot of bipartisan support to tackle something like this. In your mind, why would you think there'd be resistance to this?
Well, I think part of it is the workforce challenges that the state government is facing today. I could recognize that an agency might come back and say, hey, we don't have the bandwidth or the ability to do this. But I would actually argue quite the opposite, that this is a regular process that they should be going through anyway. And one in which, if you identify the appropriate efficiencies, maybe you reduce on redundancy or you reduce on unnecessary reporting or unnecessary licensing or permitting that's required, you'd actually be able to free up the time necessary in order to conduct these on a regular basis. I know the bill calls for it every 7 years. Other states, as identified in my testimony, do it every 5 years. It's just a way to make sure that state government is running the most efficient way. So that potentially could be some pushback, although I would argue that this should be able to be done within existing appropriations.
All right, thank you very much for that, and I agree with you. I think it should be, part of these agencies' duties to perform these reviews of regulations, because many of them are extremely outdated, and as you said, it would benefit not only the public, but it would also benefit the agency by getting rid of some of this stuff. So, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Representative Harney. And Representative Dathan, you have another question?
Actually, I had a question I thought of. In terms of some of these other states that you highlighted in your research, did you find any state that has a mechanism where it offers the business community, individuals to comment on potential outdated regulations, so that, a member of the committee population can just come and say, this, this no longer makes sense for what we have, and petition the agency to remove the regulation?
So as I mentioned before, Arizona actually added a online portal 2 years ago for individuals to be able to submit there. I believe the Texas Sunset Commission also takes public input on regulations that need to be repealed. Also, in Connecticut, we have the public comment period for different regulations, but that's only available if that regulation gets changed, right? So that's where this opportunity, if we were to include it, perhaps even through the e-reg system, and the opportunity to be able to make those recommendations. I know that is something that came up multiple times during those forums throughout the year last year, was, let's develop a way for people to be able to make those types of recommendations.
That's helpful. Thank you so much. That's kind of where I was going.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Representative Dathan. Let me just conclude with, I appreciate the comment about making this more accessible to the public and maybe making it available on websites. So that's another point of accessibility, because it's already so difficult to navigate as it is. And then I wanted to follow up, in fact, on what Representative Carney said. I'm interested that you put this working group together of all these various sectors. And I would imagine that when it comes to individual regulations, there maybe some, right, that sectors will disagree of whether or not it's necessary or if it, so where was there consensus as, you know, in terms of these sort of outdated regulations that are really sort of, you know, because I imagine like some around worker safety, then the unions would be supporting those. So those aren't things that need to be sunset, though they might, right, cause other kind of hurdles. So where was the consensus around the regulations that were
just-
really kind of
Sure.
creating constraint? Yeah.
To look at it kind of generally, a lot of it was around the number of permits that are required and the length of time in order for those permits to be reviewed. So that tends to be an issue that they face. Connecticut has a significant number of permits across different state agencies versus other states that have what are known as general permits in some cases for certain things. So say stormwater runoff, and you can get a general permit rather than getting the series of 3 or 4 different types of permits that are available here in Connecticut. So those types of regulatory changes that can actually streamline the process. Additionally, you know, just the idea of timelines on different permitting processes. A lot of them don't have an end date, right? So you submit them, they get put into the system, and then there's really no resolution to them until the state agency gets around to acting on them. So what a lot of the complaints that we receive from different businesses across different agencies, across different industry sectors was that the timeline that it takes in order to get a permit is very, very difficult. And I know that a number of state agencies are adopting new kind of permitting portals to be able to kind of create a better access to being able to see where your permit is in that process. And we very much look forward to those being adopted because those are best practices from other states that they've seen, that they've been able to identify like where they are in that process. Because when a business puts in a permit, say to do an expansion of their business, and they have to get 7 different permits from 7 different agencies without knowing, you know, where they are in the process with the Department of Transportation, where they are in the process with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. They're not aware of when they need to line up financing, when they need to start hiring to staff up, when they can actually execute the contracts, and maybe purchase materials in a timely way in order to save and reduce costs. So those types of regulations and reforms could go a long way with just making Connecticut that much more of a business-friendly state.
Oh, thank you for that. And thank you for the recommendations and the, you know, comparative analysis and programs in other states. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and we're more than happy to continue to have this dialogue and answer any questions that you guys might have going forward. We do have our own CBI Foundation that is doing this research, so be more than happy to have them sit down and discuss this topic with you as well if you'd like.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. And our next speaker is Olivia Rinks. I think on Zoom. Great.
Good morning, and thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. My name is Olivia Rinkus. I'm a resident of North Stonington, Connecticut, and also a student at the University of Connecticut studying political and cognitive sciences. Thank you to the Government Oversight Committee this morning for the opportunity to testify in support of HB 6931, an act concerning conflicts of interest due to an employer other than the state under the State Code of Ethics, and SB 1296, an act concerning statements of financial interest under the State Code of Ethics for public officials. I strongly support the updates to existing legislation as suggested in HB 6931 and SB 1296 that will update protections against conflicts of interest and further strengthen transparency. I believe HB 6931 could go further to strengthen transparency and reduce the possibility of conflicts of interest by updating the language to include employees or employers who are not considered state employees but work to further state goals, including special governmental employees or other appointed employees or employees of commissions and contracted agencies or employers. I believe this bill could also go further by strengthening data privacy protections against access from public officials or state employees who may have a conflict of interest in the data being accessed. I believe HB 6931 and SB 1296 will enable greater transparency and prevent governmental misuse by reducing the ability of elected officials, state employees, and state departments to engage in decision-making, policy-making, and other actions when they, their spouses or dependents, and employees or employers stand to gain or lose financially or poses another form of conflict of interest, and prevent these conflicts from influencing state actions and resources. I urge legislators to pass this swiftly to prevent the influence of, in particular, the influence of corporate cannabis interests on the Department of Consumer Protection in the formation of legislation that would negatively impact the medical cannabis industry by further reducing the accessibility of safe, quality cannabis products for individuals who depend on this program to access their medications. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from the committee? If you could just clarify the point you made about the data privacy and access and its relation to this bill, that would be great.
I just believe that access of data by a government or state official should be specifically for state purposes and prevented when it's an individual who may pose a conflict of interest. I'm not sure if that's already in the bill. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. Oh, sorry. There's Representative Dathan.
Thank you very much, Olivia. I just wanted to check that you're going to submit your testimony to the system so we can have your comments available.
Oh yes, I will definitely do that as soon as I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Dathan. And next we have, next actually we have Representative Santos. I think you're on Zoom and would like to provide testimony. Okay, let us know if you wanted to testify, but it looks I don't we will send us a message in case you want to testify. It looks like maybe that was not the case. So let's move on to the next speaker, Christina Capitan from CT Canna Warriors.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, Madam Chair Dathan, ranking members, Representative Sampson and Representative Carney, and esteemed members of the Government Oversight Committee. My name is Christina Capitan. I reside in Broadbrook, Connecticut, and I am a representative of the CT Canna Warriors, which is a grassroots cannabis advocacy organization in Connecticut. I'm here today in support of all three of the bills on the agenda. And I appreciate the complexity of the work that this committee is entrusted to do. I believe that these three items on the agenda passage are crucial for increasing transparency, accountability, and ethical oversight in state agencies overall, but particularly within the Department of Consumer Protection medical cannabis program. For years, I have watched as the Department of Consumer Protection's lack of transparency has led to inconsistent policies, delays in patient services, and decisions that appear to favor corporate interests over patient needs. HB 6931 would potentially prevent conflicts of interest in regulatory decisions. HB 6073, as I understand it, would help improve outdated and burdensome regulations. And SB 1296 seems to ensure financial disclosures to prevent undue industry influence. These bills, I feel that these bills are essential to restoring trust and ensuring fair governance in Connecticut. So I urge your support. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? No. Thank you very much. And then we have our next speaker, Josiah Schlee, also from CT Canna Warriors.
Yep, I'm here. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon to the member of the Government Oversight Committee. I really appreciate you having this meeting today. I just wanted to voice my support for all three pieces of legislation, 1296, 6931, and also 6073. a quick change I would suggest to 6073, I believe was previously brought up, just to maybe shorten the period from 7 years to 5 years. And I just wanted to state that it's my personal opinion that if you make one new regulation, you should remove 10. So I'm all about efficiency. And I just have a few questions because the self-policing of legislators and the abstinence, how would you ever like get a number or a record or know why they abstained from a vote? I guess it's putting a lot of trust in people to self-police. I do believe, generally people are good, but there are people with certain malintent. And if there's self-policing, then I'm just concerned about the amount of self-reporting and abstaining that would be occurring.
Mr.
And
I just want to make sure you're providing testimony. We're not answering questions at this time, but happy for you to raise concerns that you'd like the committee to consider
okay,
as we're considering these bills. So yeah, just
okay, I'll
clarify
focus on
that.
that.
Yeah.
I apologize. So I guess I would like to suggest that the significant financial interest of the state. I know there are SFI filers. I believe I was able to download like a XLS sheet of just names, but it would be nice to see at least maybe the category industry that the conflict was in, that that they were required to file. And one final large matter that is in, I know it's regulation review. I'm probably interpreting it wrong a little bit, but right now we're working on cannabis legislation, but the DCP has not released their new regulations for either adult or palliative use. That comment period started in November and it ended January 10th. And we desperately need that information to make informed decisions as we're working in the legislature regarding all the 34 bills regarding cannabis. So the GCP really needs to get those comments and regulations up. So what we're working with. And I apologize if there's too many questions asking and if I was a little bit off, got a little bit thrown off, but I do appreciate you hearing me. And I appreciate so much what this committee does. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Lewandowski. I've been in contact with him for his work and Representative Dathan for, I believe, putting forward that one bill. And I just thank you very much for your time. And if I have any questions, like I had a lot, I would love to get in contact with people to get some answers about this. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Schley. And thank you for raising those concerns. I think those are important points that you noted, and we'll take that into consideration as we're looking at these bills. But definitely you're welcome to reach out to us individually as well. Thank you for those, again, thank you for those comments. And let me ask if there are any questions for you about your testimony from the committee members. No, there are not. Thank you very much. And I think that's our last. Are there any others?
Thank you.
Are there any other speakers on Zoom or in person that would like to testify today before we close the meeting? No, we're not seeing any answer. Okay, so I think, do I have to call a motion to adjourn the public hearing? Can I have a motion to adjourn our public hearing? Okay. Second, thank you. All right, so we are adjourned. Thank you very much for everybody that participated and contributed comments.